The stadium was packed. Over 60,000 people screaming, lights flashing, music shaking the ground. It was supposed to be another flawless moment in a Michael Jackson concert. Perfectly rehearsed, perfectly controlled, perfectly Michael. Until it wasn't. In the middle of the performance, during a fast transition near the edge of the stage, Michael Jackson tripped. For a split second, the world froze. Then he fell directly into the crowd. Security rushed forward. Fans screamed. The music stopped abruptly. Chaos threatened to explode in seconds. But before anyone could react, one woman in the crowd did something no one expected. Something that shocked the security team. Something that silenced the audience. Something Michael Jackson would never forget. What did she do in that moment? Why did Michael react the way he did afterward? And how did this single act change the entire night and the way Michael saw his fans forever? Stay with us, because this is not just a story about a fall on stage. It's about what happened after, and why sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones no one planned. The night had begun like hundreds of others. Bright lights flooded the stadium, sweeping across thousands of faces pressed together in anticipation. The air vibrated with screams, chants, and the deep pulse of bass echoing through the concrete stands. For the audience, it felt electric. For Michael Jackson, it felt familiar. The controlled chaos of a live performance, the rhythm he had lived inside since childhood. Michael stood backstage for a brief moment before stepping into the light. He closed his eyes, took a slow breath, and placed one gloved hand over his chest. This ritual never changed. No matter how many shows he had done, no matter how big the crowd, he always centered himself before walking on stage. "Let's go," someone said behind him. The curtain lifted. The roar of the crowd exploded like thunder. Michael stepped forward, body moving almost automatically, muscle memory guiding him as the opening notes hit. Every movement was precise, every step rehearsed, every spin timed perfectly to the beat. From the outside, it looked effortless, as if gravity itself bent his will. But inside, Michael felt the strain. He had been pushing himself harder than usual on this tour. Long rehearsals, little sleep, constant travel. His body was thinner, weaker, though he tried to hide it behind flawless choreography and carefully tailored costumes. He ignored the aches, the dizziness that sometimes came when he moved too fast. The show had to go on. It always did. As the performance built toward one of the most energetic sequences, Michael moved closer to the edge of the stage. The crowd surged forward instinctively, arms reaching up, voices rising in excitement. Security guards lined the barrier below, eyes scanning constantly. The music hit a sharp transition, a moment Michael had performed hundreds of times before. A fast pivot, a backward step, a turn, and then it happened. Michael's foot caught on something. A loose cable, a slight uneven panel. No one would ever be entirely sure. Time slowed. His balance shifted. His body leaned back farther than it should have. For a fraction of a second, Michael tried to recover, muscles tightening as he fought gravity. But gravity won. He stumbled. Gasps rippled through the front rows as people realized something was wrong. Michael's arms lifted instinctively, not as part choreography, but in a reflexive attempt to steady himself. Then he fell, not just onto the stage, but over the edge, tumbling directly into the mass of people below. Screams replaced cheers instantly. The music cut out in a jarring silence. Stage lights flickered awkwardly, still trained on the spot where Michael had been standing just moments before. Security surged forward, shouting commands, trying to push through the tightly packed crowd. Fans panicked, some reaching out in shock, others pulling back in fear of hurting him. Michael felt hands everywhere. His body was jolted, pressed, supported, grabbed, not violently, but chaotically. He felt a sharp pain shoot through his side as he landed awkwardly, the breath knocked from his lungs. For a moment, all he could hear was ringing in his ears and the distant echo of thousands of voices shouting at once. He tried to move. He couldn't. Fear flashed through him. Not fear of the crowd, but fear of being helpless, of losing control in front of so many people. He had spent his life mastering every movement, every moment on stage. This wasn't supposed to happen. "Michael," someone shouted. Security was still seconds away. And then something unexpected happened. Amid the chaos, amid the reaching hands and frantic shouting, one woman directly beneath him didn't panic. She didn't scream. She didn't grab at him. She didn't try to pull him closer. Instead, she did the opposite. She wrapped one arm protectively around Michael's shoulder, not possessive, not invasive, and raised her other hand, shouting at the people around her to stop moving. "Don't touch him. Give him space," she yelled. Her voice cut through the noise with startling authority. She positioned her body between Michael and the pushing crowd, using herself as a shield. She spoke calmly to him, close to his ear, her tone steady. "You're okay. I've got you. Don't move." Michael heard her voice through the haze, and something about it grounded him. It wasn't hysterical. It wasn't demanding. It was human. Security finally reached them, forming a protective barrier. But they noticed something immediately. Michael wasn't being harmed. He wasn't being pulled at. He wasn't panicking. He was being protected by a fan. As guards carefully lifted him and guided him back toward the stage, Michael turned his head slightly, eyes meeting the woman's for just a second. She looked terrified, not for herself, but for him. And in that brief moment, as he was carried away, Michael understood something profound. Even in the middle of chaos, even when control was lost, there were people in that crowd who didn't see him as an object, a legend, or a trophy. They saw him as a person who needed help. Backstage, as medics rushed toward him and voices overlapped in frantic concern, Michael kept thinking about that moment. The calm voice, the protective arm, the refusal to take advantage of his vulnerability. The fall had shaken him physically. But what that woman did, that shook him emotionally in a way he never expected. And this was only the beginning of what would become one of the most unforgettable nights of his life. The backstage corridor felt unnaturally quiet compared to the chaos Michael had just left behind. Moments earlier, the stadium had been a living organism, roaring, screaming, pulsing with energy. Now, as security ushered him behind the curtain, the noise dulled into a distant murmur, like waves crashing far away. The sudden contrast made his head spin more than the fall itself. "Careful. Easy," a medic said, guiding Michael toward a chair. Michael nodded faintly, still catching his breath. His chest rose and fell quickly, each inhale shallow, as adrenaline slowly drained from his system. His body trembled, not just from pain, but from shock. Falls happened in rehearsals. Slips happened in private. But this had happened in front of thousands of people. And worse, into them. "Are you hurt?" someone asked urgently. I don't know," Michael replied softly. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. The medics quickly checked his arms, legs, ribs. A sharp pain flared when one of them pressed against his side, and Michael winced. Nothing felt broken, but everything felt wrong, bruised, sore, overstimulated. "What about your head?" the medic asked. Michael shook it gently. "No, I don't think I hit it." As they worked, voices crowded around him. Tour managers, security heads, assistants, all speaking at once. "We stopped the show. The crowd is still freaking out. We need to decide what to say. Do we bring him back out?" Michael lifted one hand slowly. "Please," he said, barely above a whisper. "Just give me a second." They fell silent. He closed his eyes, leaning back against the wall. Images replayed in his mind on a loop. The misstep, the sudden loss of balance, the terrifying sensation of falling with no way to stop it. But then, over and over, another image returned. The woman, her face, her arm around his shoulder, her voice, calm, steady, protective. Michael opened his eyes again. "Did anyone see her?" he asked suddenly. "See who?" a manager replied. "The woman," Michael said, "in the crowd. The one who protected me." They exchanged confused glances. "Sir, there were thousands of people down there." "No," Michael said more firmly. "She was right under me. She told people to stop. She kept them back." One of the security guards hesitated. "Actually, yeah, I saw that. She wasn't grabbing him like the others. She was shielding him." Michael's heart tightened. "Where is she?" he asked. Security shifted uncomfortably. "We don't know." She was moved back with the crowd once we got to you. Michael looked down at his hands. They were still shaking slightly. Can you find her? He asked. There was a pause. Michael, his tour manager said carefully, right now, we need to focus on you. The show, the press, the crowd. I don't care about the press, Michael interrupted quietly, but with an edge they rarely heard. I want to know if she's okay. That stopped them. The room fell silent again. I fell on her, Michael continued. I could have hurt her, and instead of pushing me away, she helped me. Something shifted in the air. This wasn't a celebrity concerned about optics. This was a man shaken by his own vulnerability. I need to know she's okay, he repeated. A security supervisor nodded. I'll see what I can do. As the team dispersed, Michael was left alone for a moment with one medic, who finished wrapping an ice pack around his ribs. You scared a lot of people out there, the medic said gently. Michael gave a weak smile. They scare me, too. The medic chuckled softly, then grew serious. You're lucky. Things could have gone very differently. Michael knew that. He thought about how easily panic could have turned into injury for him or for fans. He thought about how many times he'd heard stories of artists overwhelmed by crowds, pulled apart by hands that didn't mean harm, but caused it anyway. And then he thought again about the woman who did the opposite. For years, Michael had struggled with how people saw him. To some, he was an icon. To others, a spectacle. To many, something unreal, untouchable. But in that moment, falling into the crowd, stripped of control and choreography, he hadn't been a star. He'd been a human being. And she had treated him like one. A knock broke his thoughts. The security supervisor stepped back into the room. We might have something. Michael sat up straighter immediately. What? There's a woman in the medical tent outside. She refused to leave until she knew you were okay. She has a bruised arm. Says it happened when people pushed forward after you fell. Michael's breath caught. Can I see her? He asked. The supervisor hesitated. That's not standard protocol. Michael stood slowly, ignoring the ache in his side. I'm not asking as Michael Jackson performer, he said quietly. I'm asking as a man who fell on her. That settled it. Minutes later, Michael was guided down a quieter hallway toward the temporary medical area set up behind the stadium. With each step, his body protested, but his resolve didn't waver. When he reached the tent, he saw her immediately. She was sitting on a folding chair, her arm wrapped in gauze, her posture tense. She looked small in the harsh fluorescent light, suddenly unsure of herself without the chaos of the crowd. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes widened. Oh, she whispered. You're okay. Michael stopped in front of her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael did something no one expected. He reached out, slowly, carefully, and took her uninjured hand in both of his. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You protected me. Tears welled in her eyes immediately. I didn't want anyone to hurt you. Michael nodded. You didn't see a star when I fell, he said softly. You saw a person. And for Michael Jackson, that realization meant more than any standing ovation ever could. What he didn't know yet was that this encounter, born from a moment of fear and chaos, was about to change the way he thought about his fans, himself, and what truly mattered when the lights went out. Michael sat across from her on a narrow bench inside the medical tent. The noise of the stadium reduced to a distant echo. For the first time since the fall, the world felt still. Her name was Elena. She told him quietly, almost apologetically, as if she were worried it might not matter. I didn't mean to cause trouble, she said, adjusting the gauze on her arm. I just reacted. Michael shook his head gently. You didn't cause trouble. You stopped it. Elena looked down, embarrassed. People were pushing. Everyone wanted to touch you. I saw your face when you fell. You looked scared. Michael swallowed. No one ever said that to him. People talked about his strength, his magic, his control. No one acknowledged fear, especially his. I was, he admitted, very. The honesty surprised them both. For years, Michael had learned to hide fear behind choreography, behind sequins and lights, behind a persona built to survive pressure no one should carry. But here, sitting under a tent with fluorescent lights and folding chairs, there was no stage to perform on, only truth. I thought, Elena continued carefully, if people panic, someone gets hurt. So I yelled. I told them to back up. I put my arm around you because, I don't know, it felt instinctive. Michael nodded slowly. You chose calm when everyone else chose chaos. He looked at her arm again, bruised beneath the bandage. I'm so sorry you got hurt because of me. She shook her head immediately. No, please don't say that. I would do it again. Michael closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the sincerity in her voice. I've been on stages my whole life, he said quietly. I've fallen before, emotionally, mentally, but never like that. Never physically into people. He paused. For a second, I thought I was going to disappear, that the crowd would swallow me. Elena looked at him then, really looked at him, not as a performer, but as a man sitting inches away, still pale, still shaken. You didn't, she said. You landed. Something about those words stayed with him. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a muffled chant rose from the crowd, his name still echoing through the stadium despite the halted show. Michael winced slightly at the sound. I don't think I can go back out there, he admitted. There it was, the sentence no one around him wanted to hear. Elena didn't react with disappointment or shock. She simply nodded. That's okay, she said. You don't owe anyone anything right now. Michael felt his throat tighten. Most people around him spoke in obligations. Contracts, expectations, timelines, never permission. Everyone expects me to be invincible, he said, to keep going no matter what. Elena met his eyes. But you're not a machine. The words hit him harder than the fall. I know, he whispered, but sometimes I forget. A medic stepped into the tent, clearing his throat politely. Michael, we need to know if you're going back on stage or if we should make an announcement. Michael looked at Elena instinctively, as if seeking guidance he hadn't realized he needed. She didn't tell him what to do. She simply said, What do you want? He took a deep breath. I want them to be safe, he said, and I want to be honest. The medic nodded and stepped back out. Michael turned to Elena again. Would you be willing to stay a little longer? Just until things calm down. She smiled softly. Of course. Minutes passed. Then more. The crowd outside grew quieter as an announcement was made, a calm voice explaining that the show will be paused due to an incident, thanking everyone for their patience, asking them to remain calm. No blame. No panic. Michael listened, relieved. I wish every moment could be handled like that, he said. Elena smiled faintly. Sometimes it takes one person to slow things down. He looked at her thoughtfully. You know, he said, people always ask me what it's like to have millions of fans. They think it's comforting. He paused. But sometimes it's lonely. Elena didn't interrupt. When you're surrounded by people who want something from you, he continued, it's hard to know who sees you. Not the image, not the idea. Just you. She nodded slowly. I never wanted anything from you. He believed her. That's why, Michael said, when you grabbed my arm, I felt safe. And I don't feel safe often. The admission hung heavy between them. Elena's eyes filled with tears, though she didn't let them fall. I'm glad, she said softly. I'm really glad. Another security guard appeared at the tent entrance. Michael, transportation is ready. We're moving you to the hospital for precautionary checks. Michael sighed, reality returning. He stood slowly, wincing, then turned back to Elena. I don't want you just sent home and forgotten, he said. You were hurt protecting me. That matters. She shook her head. You don't have to. I want to, he said gently. Please. He reached into his jacket and handed a folded card to a staff member. Make sure she's taken care of. And I'd like to speak with her again if she's comfortable. Elena looked stunned. I don't know what to say. Michael smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. Say you're okay, he replied. She laughed softly through tears. I will be. As he was guided away, Michael glanced back once more. Elena stood there, clutching the bandage on her arm, watching him leave, Not waving, not shouting, just present. For the first time in a long time, Michael didn't feel like he was leaving a crowd. He felt like he was leaving a person. And he had no idea yet that this moment, born from a stumble and a fall, would ripple outward, changing how he approached his fans, his shows, and the fragile truth that even legends are human. The fall had shaken the stadium, but the aftermath was shaking something deeper. Inside him, the ambulance doors closed with a muted thud, sealing Michael off from the roar of the stadium. As the vehicle pulled away, flashing lights reflected against the dark night sky, carrying with them not just an injured performer, but a moment that would be replayed in the minds of thousands for years to come. Inside the arena, confusion lingered like smoke after a fire. No music played. No dancers returned to the stage. The giant screens, once filled with color and motion, now showed only a simple message asking the audience to remain calm and exit slowly. For a crowd conditioned to spectacle, silence felt unsettling. People looked at one another, searching for reassurance. Is he okay? Did you see him fall? That woman, did you see what she did? The story began to spread in fragments, passed from mouth to mouth like sparks jumping between dry leaves. Some said Michael had slipped on sweat. Others claimed someone had pulled him. But one detail remained constant in every version. A woman from the crowd had protected him. Security teams moved carefully, guiding sections of the audience out one at a time. There was no panic now, only a subdued, almost reverent mood. Many fans walked with their heads down, replaying the image of their idol falling, fragile and human, into a sea of hands. Backstage, the atmosphere was heavy. Dancers sat on the floor still in costume, makeup smudged with sweat and tears. Crew members spoke in hushed tones, afraid that loud voices might somehow make the situation worse. One of the lighting technicians stared at the stage, unmoving. "I've worked with him for 12 years, he said quietly. "I've never seen him lose control like that." Another crew member replied, "None of us have." The show had been built on precision. Every step timed, every light cue rehearsed, every movement calculated down to the second. Michael Jackson concerts were machines of perfection, and machines were not supposed to fall. Yet tonight they had. At the hospital, Michael lay on a narrow bed under harsh white lights. Doctors moved efficiently, checking vitals, scanning for concussion symptoms, monitoring bruising along his ribs and hip. Physically, the damage was manageable. Emotionally, it was something else entirely. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic beep of a monitor, his thoughts louder than the machine. For years, he had been afraid of something like this. Not the pain, but the exposure. Falling had stripped away the illusion of control he had worked his entire life to maintain. The doctor finally spoke. "You're lucky," he said. "No fractures. Mild concussion symptoms, but nothing severe." Michael nodded slowly. "Lucky," he repeated under his breath. The doctor hesitated before continuing. "We'd like to keep you overnight for observation." Michael didn't argue. Later, when the room quieted, he asked softly, "The woman, is she all right?" The nurse smiled gently. "Yes, minor injury to her arm. She refused to leave until she knew you were safe." Michael closed his eyes, a knot forming in his chest. That single sentence carried more comfort than any medical reassurance. Outside the hospital, fans had already gathered, candles flickering in the night. Word had spread quickly, faster than any official statement. Social media buzzed with shaky videos and emotional messages. Some posts were frantic. "Please be okay. We love you, Michael." Others were reflective. "I never realize how fragile he looks when he's not dancing." And then there were the messages about her. Photos circulated, grainy, imperfect, but clear enough to show a woman with her arm around Michael as he struggled to stand. Her face partially obscured, her expression focused, protective. She didn't scream. She didn't grab. She shielded him. By morning, headlines appeared. Michael Jackson injured after onstage fall. Fan intervenes. Concert pause after unexpected incident. Witnesses describe moment of silence after star falls. But one headline stood out, shared more than the others. When the crowd stopped, one person stepped forward. Michael read it later that day from his phone, his fingers trembling slightly. He had always been the one stepping forward, the one reaching out, the one lifting spirits, raising money, inspiring crowds. This time, someone had caught him. The realization unsettled him. In the days that followed, the canceled show became a topic of endless debate. Some criticized the safety measures. Others argued about crowd control. But most conversations shifted toward something deeper: boundaries. People began asking uncomfortable questions. How close was too close? How much access was too much? At what point does admiration become danger? Michael listened to these discussions quietly from his recovery room, absorbing them in ways he hadn't before. He had spent decades telling the world about love, healing, and humanity, yet he had rarely allowed himself to be human in return. That night, he asked for pen and paper. He wrote slowly, carefully, as if choosing each word might steady his hands. Tonight reminded me that even in a crowd of thousands, it only takes one calm heart to change everything. I fell, but I was lifted. Thank you for remembering that I am human, too. He didn't post it. Not yet. Some things needed time. Meanwhile, Elena, now identified by fans and media, had quietly returned to her normal life. She avoided interviews, declined requests, ignored messages from strangers calling her a hero. To her, it hadn't felt heroic. It had felt necessary. She sat at home that evening, arms still sore, watching the news replay the incident again and again. Each time she saw Michael fall, her stomach tightened. Each time she saw herself reach out, she felt a strange mixture of pride and disbelief. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then a familiar, soft voice spoke. Hi, this is Michael. She froze. I just wanted to tell you, he continued gently. The world is still talking about the fall. He paused. But I haven't stopped thinking about the catch. Elena swallowed hard, tears forming again. Neither of them knew it yet, but that single moment, born from chaos, silent, and instinct, had created something rare in Michael's life. Not a fan story, not a headline, but a shared human memory. And it was far from over. The call ended quietly. No dramatic goodbye. No promises made. Just two people breathing on opposite ends of the line, fully aware that something irreversible had already happened. For Michael Jackson, the days after the fall moved slower than usual. His body healed faster than his mind. Bruises faded. Headaches softened. But the memory replayed constantly. The split second of imbalance, the rush of hands, the feeling of losing control, and then the unexpected calm when one person chose not to take, but to protect. He had spent a lifetime building walls between himself and the crowd. That night, one wall had collapsed. His team urged him to rest, to disconnect, to avoid media. Doctors advised caution. Lawyers advised silence. Everyone had an opinion about what the incident meant. But Michael only cared about one thing. Why had it affected him so deeply? He sat alone in his room late one night, lights dimmed, a notebook open in front of him. He wrote and crossed out sentences repeatedly. I fell. No. Too simple. They caught me. Not true. One person did. I was afraid. Too honest. Eventually, he stopped writing and simply stared at the page. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to sit with the truth without transforming it into art, music, or performance. He had been terrified, not of injury, of being seen. On the other side of the city, Elena tried to return to normal life. She went back to work, took public transport, bought groceries, answered emails. From the outside, everything looked unchanged. Inside, everything felt different. People recognized her now. Some smiled, some whispered, others stared too long. She learned to keep her head down, to avoid eye contact. Fame, she realized, didn't need consent. It simply arrived. Yet what surprised her most wasn't the attention. It was the silence. No one truly asked how she felt. They asked what Michael said, what he smelled like, whether his skin was soft, whether she thought he was fragile. No one asked what it felt like to be responsible for another human being's safety for a brief, terrifying moment. Late one evening, she sat on her couch with the TV off, The room quiet except for distant traffic. Her arm still ached faintly, a reminder that the moment hadn't been imagined. Her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. I hope this isn't intrusive. I just want to say thank you again. Not as an artist, as a person. She stared at the screen for a long time before replying. You're welcome. I'm glad you're okay. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. May I ask you something? She hesitated. Yes. When I fell, why didn't you panic? She thought carefully before answering. Because panic would have made it worse. Another pause. You didn't try to grab me. I didn't want to hurt you. That was when Michael closed his eyes. For decades, people had reached for him without considering the cost, without considering his balance, his space, his fragility. And yet, in the most chaotic moment of the night, one person had chosen restraint over possession. That choice haunted him in the best way. A week later, Michael made a decision that surprised his team. He wanted to return to the stage. Not immediately, not recklessly, but deliberately. He insisted on changes. More space between the stage and the crowd. Additional safety checks. Slower transitions near the edge. The show would remain spectacular, but safer. Some producers pushed back. This never happened before. They argued. Michael's voice stayed calm. It happened once, he said. That's enough. On the night of his return, the arena was quieter than usual before the show began. There was excitement, yes, but also tension. Everyone remembered the fall. Everyone remembered the silence. Michael stood backstage, eyes closed, breathing steadily. He placed a hand over his heart, not out of superstition, but grounding. As the music began, and he stepped into the light, the crowd erupted. But this time, something felt different. He didn't rush the edges. He didn't push his body past its limits. He didn't disappear into the performance the way he used to. He stayed present. Midway through the show, during a pause between songs, Michael walked toward the front of the stage and raised his hand. The crowd slowly quieted. I want to say something, he said softly. The arena leaned in. Last time I was here, I fell. A ripple moved through the audience. And I realized something important, he continued. We all think strength is never falling. But sometimes strength is being caught, and sometimes it's choosing to catch without hurting. People held their breath. I'm still here because someone remembered I'm human. He paused. So tonight, let's take care of each other. Thunderous applause followed, not frantic, not hysterical, but deep and steady. Somewhere in the crowd, Elena stood quietly. She hadn't planned to attend. She hadn't wanted attention. But something pulled her there. She didn't scream. She didn't wave. She didn't try to be seen. She simply listened. Michael never pointed her out, never named her, never turned the moment into spectacle. That was intentional, because some moments were meant to remain human, not legendary. As the final song ended and the lights dimmed, Michael bowed deeply. One hand pressed to his chest. For the first time in a long while, the applause felt different. It didn't demand anything. It thanked. And as the crowd slowly filtered out, many people carried the same quiet thought with them. That night wasn't remembered because Michael Jackson fell. It was remembered because in a crowd of thousands, one person chose care over chaos and reminded the world that even legends need gentleness.